Hello, music lovers. Welcome back. I'd like you to help me out with a little experiment, if you will. Right here, I have a couple of chords. I'm going to call them question chords. You'll see I've labeled them Q. And using your beautiful ears, I'd like you to tell me which one of our possible answers here you feel resolves our question the best. Which sounds like it most lands home. Okay? Here's our question chords. So 2 chords. Now let me show you some possible answers. Okay, so I'm going to guess most of you picked number 4, the last one. Am I right? If you didn't think number 4 came home best, let me know in the comments. I'll be interested to find out which one you did. Most of you, however, I think will have picked number 4. And to explain why that might be the case, I need to tell you about a couple of musical principles. The first is something called functional harmony. The second reason is because of something called voice leading. And after that, we can talk about the cool chord swap up, which amplifies both of those things. So the idea for this video came about from a session the other week. I was working with DJ Clips, and he set me a 15-minute challenge. I had 15 minutes to pull together a quick garage vibe for a little experiment we were working on. So I usually find it's quicker just to work with audio loops. So we found these free drums on Looperman. Good stuff. And then on Splice from a garage pack called Sunday Scene, if you know, you know, this keys loop. Basically a chopped up DX piano. And in the same pack, the bass line to go with it. And also on Splice, this vocal from Mint Vocal Hooks. So, not bad. However, DJ Clips said something sounds off. He observed something wrong with that keys loop, especially in the context of the vocal, commenting that it would be fine as a ravey vibe on its own, but with a commercial vocal like that, it doesn't seem to be moving in the right places. I had a good theory about what he was hearing there, and it's this. The last 2 chords on the keys loop are in the wrong order. To explain why I think that, I need to show you it in action. So let's swap the order of these. We have these 3 stabs, they're on 1 chord, and then the next chord is on the last 2 stabs. We're going to keep the original rhythm so everything still lines up. Matching note length, because that's important. And the off-grid positions are because of the swing. That's also important. I've already done the same for the bass here, so you don't have to sit through it.
of your life, make it right, babe. You have so much to show for yourself. Yeah, take control of your life, do it right, babe. I will be at your side for every step of the way. Take a hold of your life, make it right, babe. You have so much to show for yourself. Yeah, take control of your life, do it right, babe. I will be at your side for every step of the way. Take a hold of your life, make it right, babe. You have so much to show for yourself. Yeah, take control of your life, do it right, babe. I will be at your side for every step of the way.
So yes, that did indeed fix what he was hearing. Hopefully you too can hear that works better now. Let me tell you why that might be. Okay, so why does this happen? I believe one of the reasons is rather well explained by something called functional harmony. In the late 1800s, a chap called Hugo Riemann came up with this theory. Thank you, Wikipedia. The concept is actually very simple. It describes that each chord doesn't just exist in a vacuum. They each have a role to play, a purpose, especially in the context of each other. Those of you who commented on my last chord videos should find this way of thinking quite helpful, as I had many comments to the effect of, great, now I know how to build a chord, now I know what a seventh is, etc., etc., but now what do I do with them? This is going to be a big help. On your screen, you see the 7 chords of a minor scale. Doesn't matter which one, the key doesn't matter here. Now, Riemann used terms like dominant and subdominant. It's all rather kinky. Whereas I prefer to think of it in terms of home and each chord's relationship to home. So obviously, chord 1 is home. That's our tonal center. Now, if any of you have looked at chords before, you may have come across the concept of the 5-1. 5 and 1 have a very special relationship. 5's purpose in life seems to be that it wants to return home. Hopefully you can hear how well resolved that sounds when you go from 5 to 1. So I like to describe chord 5 as on its way home. Now, there are other chords that share notes with chord 5 and therefore serve a similar purpose, like 7. Especially if you put 7 in a similar octave to 1. Hopefully you agree that sounds good resolving to 1. Also, surprisingly, chord 2, that shares notes with chord 7, our weird distant diminished cousin here, actually sounds quite good resolving to chord 1. So 5, 7 and 2 are on the way home chords. Then we have chords which I would describe as moving away from home, like chord 4. Chord 4 feels quite comfortable. It feels like we could stay here for a little while before setting off back home and returning home. Chord 6 shares 2 notes with 4, therefore has a similar purpose. Moving away from home, setting off back home, returning home. That opening chord experiment at the beginning of the video, that was a 6-5-1. That garage keys loop earlier that sounded a little off, that was using a 5-6-1, until I corrected it, of course, to a 6-5-1. That's why it resolved better. So I like to think of 4 and 6 as moving away from home. Chord 3 is quite flexible. This is what we call the relative major when we're in a minor key. It can act as a very bright lift. And in fact, if you spend enough time here, this could now be considered the new home, and you would now be in a major scale, which is why I like to call it home from home. When I say it's flexible, I mean it will resolve to 1, or it can be used as a bridge to move us away from home. Now, you may have different feelings on which chords you feel insinuate different purposes, But the concept remains. Some have stronger relationships than others. And strong doesn't necessarily mean better, by the way. But if you're new to this, it's certainly a great starting point. Okay, so let's talk about voice leading. What is that? Well, it's another old-fashioned term, but the wording makes perfect sense. It's because before instruments were invented, we had to do everything with our mouths. And in the early days of singing, we just all sang the same thing, the same note. Soon, though, we discovered that singing different notes at the same time sounded really cool. Singing in harmony, as it were. And thus, chords became a thing. Now, unfortunately, most humans are monophonic. We can only sing one note at a time. So each person, each voice, had to sing a different note of the chord. And that's where we get the term voicing from. To show you what voice leading is, let me show you with this progression. You can hear our 6-5-1 going on in the background here. If I move chord 1 up by an octave, notice this line. Let me turn the velocity up so you can hear it. Okay, that's strong because it's a stepwise motion, notes 3, 2, 1 of the scale. What better way to return home than this falling pattern, leading us down to the root note of the home chord? A perfect example of voice leading. One voice within the chord is leading our ears in a certain direction. It's certainly one of the reasons chords seem to have these purposes, these functions. Now we can strengthen this whole relationship by adding extra leading lines, and we can do that with extensions. If I add a 7th to this chord 5 here, now we get this voice leading downwards. Okay. Now, another way of thinking about what we just did there, which is what extensions do in general, we've effectively merged chord 7 with chord 5. We did say chords 5 and 7 were interchangeable. Well, this is the best of both worlds. What was the other chord that led well into 1? It was chord 2. Let's add that. By making chord 5 a 9th chord, we now have 3 lines all leading down. So that's even stronger. Chord 6 is feeling a little lonely, wouldn't you agree? And of course, you guessed it, we can add extensions to that too. Look at how that lines up. A perfect example of voice leading to strengthen that feeling of wanting to return home. Okay, so the last piece of the puzzle builds on both functional harmony and voice leading. Whilst I was doing my garage research, yes, that video is still in the works. Thank you for your patience, everyone that has requested one. I noticed often in Garage, there's a nice little extra twist on their 5-1 that we can all learn from. Probably because they borrow heavily from R&B and soul, which in turn borrow from gospel. And speaking of church music, I have a confession to make. I have been hiding a certain truth from you all this time, to keep things simple. It was for the betterment of your early education, but you've grown up now, and it's time we had the talk. I hope you're sat down for this revolutionary news, but I need to tell you that there's more than one minor scale. I know, it's a shocker, but this is the right time. Garage is going to show us how to use one of the others. So the scale we have on screen here This minor scale I've been teaching you in for all these years. This one is known as the natural minor scale, but if you've ever scrolled through any plugin like Scaler or the Push scale options or Ableton scale options, you will notice there are other minors in there. The new one we're talking about today is called the harmonic minor. It's very simple. There's only one difference. Note 7 is sharpened. The bad news is we can no longer use all the white notes to remember the scale. But the good news is, as you may have seen from my Tech House Frisian scale video, changing one note can change a lot of things. And this unlocks a new bunch of flavors for us. Not just garage flavors either. This is useful across the board. I have heard it used and used it myself in house, techno, pop, metal. Extremely useful. The other piece of good news is this scale is interchangeable with the natural minor scale. So we can use this or this, depending on what the situation suits best. Here's a practical example so you can feel the difference. Here's natural minor. And harmonic minor. Now, of course, you saw this one coming. It's going to affect the chords we use. Here's our 6-5-1. In harmonic minor, chord 5 becomes a major chord. And yes, it works with our extensions too. Like that. Whilst I was doing my garage research, I was studying some Sammy Virji, obviously. I found 3 examples of this in his tracks. He uses a harmonic minor 6-5-1 in Foundation. I'm a brother with a solid foundation. You're not acting, can't chill. I can't cover like a BP night bill. Always on the move, can't keep still. They tell me like a bill, you better pay your bill. On the ripper bar, while I keep thrill. Then for his Peggy Goo remix, that's a 4-5-1 in harmonic minor. Then we have a 2-5-1 in harmonic minor in Find My Way Home. How cool is that? So it turns out when you're in a minor scale, as you often are, if you swap up your chord 5 to major, or in other words, swap to the harmonic minor scale, in terms of functional harmony and voice leading, that chord 5 pulls into chord 1 even stronger because the sharp 7 is now closer to the 1. So the leading line in that direction is even stronger. So hopefully you learned something. If you did, you know what to do. Help me appease the algorithm overlords. And until next week, I'll see you in the comments. Bye-bye.